We may be done with the main and co-main event discussions of UFC 314, but we've got a whole lot more to go, and it starts in the featured bout of the evening, in the bout with the most animosity throughout the entire 13-fight card. It's the 13th ranked Bryce Mitchell in the featherweight division, taking on the surging, unranked, looking to break in, Jean Silva. There's no love lost in this fight. There's nothing but hatred. There's nothing but tension so tight that you could cut it with a knife in this one. There's borderline uncomfortability in this one, and I'm recording it before the pre-fight press conference. I'm not getting into any of that out of the octagon shit. I'm here to talk about the storylines of the fight, the insignificance of it in the featherweight division. You can look into that stuff if you want on your own time. But I will say that what he did do outside of the cage led to the storylines, or some of the storylines, for this specific bout, as a lot of people were calling out Bryce Mitchell in the aftermath of his comments, and Jean Silva was the one that got granted that opportunity to do so, but it's no easy task. And that is because Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell is 17-2 as a professional mixed martial artist, and the only 2 losses in his career, Josh Emmett, and that was a vicious one-punch knockout in December of 2023 by probably the hardest puncher in the current state of the featherweight division. And the other loss, Ilia Topuria, the current, for at least a couple more days, featherweight champion of the world and still undefeated phenom. Outside of that, Bryce Mitchell has beaten Andre Fili. He's beaten Edson Barboza. He's beaten Dan Ige. He has gotten wins that have put him into his rightful spot in the top 15 of this division. And while I will say his most recent outing was one of the most random matchup I've ever seen in UFC history, outside of Casey Kenny versus Dominick Cruz. Never forget, Noah, if you're watching this. And that came at UFC 310 in December of last year, where coming off of his loss to Josh Emmett 1 year prior, he would return, but not against a top 15 featherweight, against a featherweight that no one had really even thought of in years, Kron Gracie. And he would dominate that fight from start to finish. It was not competitive whatsoever, and he would ultimately finish him with a slam down to the ground, followed up by a nasty elbow. So all in all, dating back to July of 2018, when Bryce Mitchell made his UFC debut, he's 8-2 in the UFC. As I said at the beginning, number 13 currently in the 145-pound weight class, and he's in his prime, only 30 years old. He's finished 10 out of 17 wins, with 9 of them by way of submission. So obviously, we know where he wants to take this fight. He wants to get it to the ground and impose his will in the jiu-jitsu. Although I will say we've seen glimmers of evolution in the striking of Bryce Mitchell. I think the fight where I really thought that was when he faced off against Edson Barboza, although that was 3 years ago now in March of 2022. But he has definitely gotten better in the stand-up. But good enough to compete with Jean Silva? That's another question. Because while Bryce Mitchell has 9 submissions out of 10 career finishes, Jean Silva has 12 knockouts out of 14 career finishes, so completely opposite in terms of finishing prowess. The 28-year-old fighting nerd is 15-2 overall, obviously 14 of those 15 by finish, and he himself has never been finished. In his 2 defeats, both were by way of decision, and the last time that happened, you gotta scroll all the way down to April of 2018. Undefeated in 7 years. And that 7-year unbeaten streak features 12 consecutive fights in a row that were all wins. And all but one of them were by way of finish. And that one that was a decision was his fight on Dana White's Contender Series against Kevin Vallejos, who has showed to be quite the prospect in his own right since debuting in the UFC. But much like his fighting nerds counterparts, 2024 was his year. Jean Silva would go 3-0 in his debut year, with all 3 of them coming by way of knockout, 1 in each round, 1, 2, and 3. And then he's already fought once in 2025, where he finished Melsik Bagdasaryan back in February at UFC Seattle, and he did it in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. And that finish, paired with minimal damage taken, is what allowed him to take this not short notice, but quick turnaround fight against Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell. There's a lot on the line here. Bryce Mitchell wants to stay in the top 15. Jean Silva wants to launch in to the top 15. And the winner of this will absolutely get a top 10 opportunity next, maybe even higher. And again, it's paired with all of the moving pieces in the featherweight division, because this division is on fire right now. And this fight card alone, UFC 314, has 4 top 15 matchups. I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions on this fight in the comments below. Please, if you can, keep it civil. Let's talk about just the fight itself. Next up, we get to talk about another featherweight clash. This time, the former interim champion and currently ranked number 5 featherweight in the world, Yair Rodriguez out of Mexico, will be taking on the long-time Bellator veteran, the multi-time, multi-weight class champion, Patricio Pitbull. Welcome to the UFC. Yair Rodriguez entered this fight with not much momentum going for him, as he's 0-2 in his last 2 fights. In 2024, just one fight, and it was a submission loss to Brian Ortega, where he started strong and then ultimately would just wilt under the pressure of Brian Ortega. He was able to switch the tides of that fight and get the finish. And before that, Yair would have the title unification bout against the aforementioned Alexander Volkanovski, where he would be finished in the 3rd round. So the last time that Yair has tasted victory in the UFC was February of 2023, where he would finish Josh Emmett via submission in the 2nd round to become the interim champion of the world. But at 32 years old, with nearly a decade of UFC experience under his belt already, he is still amongst the best of the best in this weight class. He's one of the longer, more rangier fighters, and he's one of the most unique stylistic matchups in the division as well for opponents to handle. And that build of Yair Rodriguez is one of the more intriguing pieces of this matchup with Patricio Pitbull, because he will be 5 inches taller and hold a 5.5 reach advantage over the Bellator veteran. Patricio Pitbull, at 37 years of age, soon to be 38 come July, enters this fight at UFC 314 with 43 professional fights under his belt, and 36 of those have gone his way. That's right, 36 wins, 7 losses, one of the greatest fighters in mixed martial arts history, just now cracking into the UFC and getting his opportunity to prove how great he is on the world's grandest stage. His last fight was in the Bellator Champion Series in March of 2024, where he defended his title against Jeremy Kennedy, and he did that with a TKO victory in the 3rd round. And let us not forget that in 2023, Patricio Pitbull was attempting to do something that we've never seen before in the big MMA organizations, and that was chase a 3rd title in a 3rd weight class. He had already won the lightweight title and the featherweight championship multiple times, and now he was looking to go down to 135 pounds and defeat and take away the title from Sergio Pettis, brother of Anthony Pettis. However, Sergio would have a pretty beautiful performance in that one and get a 25-minute unanimous decision win. It was just truly a fight that Patricio didn't belong in. He didn't belong at 135 pounds. He's just too physically big for that weight class, but got to give the guy credit for trying. So all in all, entering his UFC debut, he's won 4 of his last 6 fights. 3 of those 4 victories were by way of decision. And as I stated, 37 years old, so he's not getting any younger. And from a physical perspective, he's going to be the much smaller fighter in this one. So how will he manage the range of Yair Rodriguez? Can he get in and close the distance, get into the dirty boxing realm, and can he land takedowns and get Yair on his back? Because that is where I feel he may be able to showcase his best skills in order to get the win here. Of his 36 pro wins, 24 of them have came by finish and 12 apiece via submission and knockout. He can get it done in all facets of mixed martial arts, but if we want to find his most recent submission, we've got to go quite a ways down the list here. It was in April of 2021 where he submitted Emmanuel Sanchez at Bellator 255. So we've seen 7 fights since then for Patricio Pitbull without a submission taking place. Can he get that here against Yair Rodriguez, who has been submitted just once in his 5 professional defeats, and the other 3 times he's been finished were by way of the knockout, which I'm not saying Patricio can't do here. If he does close the distance, he absolutely has the power to put away Yair on the feet. But truthfully, for me as a fan, that's what I want to see, is Patricio Pitbull try and get this fight to the ground. Can he do it? Because I think that'll go a long way in showcasing his full range and arsenal of weapons in this featherweight division. And I'm going to be quite honest with you here. If he comes in his debut and defeats Yair Rodriguez, especially if he does it in emphatic fashion, he will 100% get the winner of Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. But do you agree with me? Will Patricio Pitbull come in and win? And if he does, is he the #1 contender for the winner of the main event? And for Yair Yair Rodriguez, can he bounce back? Can he keep himself from going on a 3-fight skid and spoil the long-awaited UFC debut of the veteran Patricio Pitbull? It's a much-needed victory for Yair Rodriguez here because, kind of similar to what I said for Diego Lopez, a loss here in this spot really puts you in the back of the line for title contention. In the opening fight of the UFC 314 main card, it's a slept-on banger. We will see the return of Nikita Krylov, who has not fought in over 2 years. His most recent outing was in March of 2023, and he is returning to take on Dominick Reyes, who may just be in the middle of a career resurgence. The 8th-ranked light heavyweight in the world, Nikita Krylov, although hasn't been active over the last 2 years, finds himself on a 3-fight win streak entering this fight at UFC 314, and 2 of those 3 are by way of finish. The most recent outing in March of 2023 was a submission over Ryan Spann. Prior to that was a decision win over Volkan Oezdemir, the former title challenger, and to start the win streak, it was a knockout over former 2-time, scratch that, 3-time title challenger Alexander Gustafsson. And somehow, someway, Nikita Krylov is just 33 years old, even though it feels like he's been in the UFC since Chuck Liddell. But that's just not the case. He actually made his UFC debut in August of 2013. As a matter of fact, he has 2 separate UFC stints. His first stretch in the UFC was August of 2013 until December of 2016. In that 3-year stretch, he had 9 fights with a record of 6-3 overall. Then he would separate himself from the UFC and go on to win 4 consecutive bouts, all of them via finish and 3 of them in the first round. That is where he would rejoin the UFC in 2018. But since rejoining the organization, this second stint has went much worse than the first one because he has had 9 fights, just like the first stint, but this one, 5 victories and 4 defeats. So I guess, in the grand scheme of things, 6-3, 5-4, both are successful. It's not that much worse. Especially when you pair in the fact that he's on a 3-fight win streak. Nikita, I take back what I said. And it's worth noting that during this second stint, he has fought much steeper competition. The losses, Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira, Magomed Ankalaev, and Paul Craig. 3 of those 4, all champions. And the victories, it's Ovince St. Preux, the longtime veteran. It's Johnny Walker, the still ranked top 15 fighter. And then Gustafsson, Oezdemir, and Ryan Spann, as we already said. He's fought some of the who's who in this division. That's probably one of the better stretches in terms of competition in all of the 205-pound weight class right now. And for Dominick Reyes, you can pretty much say the same over the last 6 years. Jared Cannonier, Ovince St. Preux, Volkan Oezdemir, Chris Weidman, John Jones, Jan Blachowicz, Jiri Prochazka, Ryan Spann, Anthony Smith, Dustin Jacoby. These 2 are some of the most experienced current 205-pounders on the planet right now, and especially when you talk about strength of schedule, these men say no to nobody. We all know the story of Dominick Reyes. He was undefeated in the UFC, he was undefeated in his entire career, and he earned his right to face John Jones for the championship in February of 2020, and he took him to the brink, and many people, to this day, 5 years later, still feel that Dominick Reyes should have become the light heavyweight champion on that night. But he would not, and he would lose a decision officially to John Jones, and that is what would start a very, very bad stretch of fights for Dominick, as he would go on to lose 3 more fights after that loss to John Jones, all 3 of them by vicious knockout. But between that last loss in November of 2022 and June of 2024, where he would come back, he would take that time to rest himself, become better physically and mentally, and it has paid dividends as he is now 2-0 since that hiatus, and both of them by way of knockout. Finishes over Dustin Jacoby in round 1 and over Anthony Smith in round 2. Both of those came in 2024, and now he will look to kickstart 2025 on a positive note, reinsert himself into the top 10 of the light heavyweight division, and at 35 years old, he absolutely can still make a name for himself, and he can still insert himself, or reinsert himself, I should say, into title contention. But it all starts with a victory over Nikita Krylov. Truthfully, the winner here, in my opinion, is just 1 win away from a title shot. Don't click away just yet. We're not done with the UFC 314 discussion, as now we head into the prelims for 4 more fights I want to talk about before we get out of here. And of course, we're back to the featherweight division, where Dan Ige, 50K, will look to hold his top 15 spot against the long, rangy, dangerous, and surging Sean Woodson. Dan Ige is an OG of Dana White's Contender Series, having competed on episode 3 of season 1 way back in 2017, 8 years ago, and since then has more than likely been, I haven't fact-checked myself here, but it seems pretty true, the most active fighter in the featherweight division. Since making his debut in January of 2018, Dan Ige has competed 18 times in the UFC, so he will be making his 19th walk to the octagon this coming Saturday at UFC 314. And while he would lose his debut at UFC 220, he didn't let that deter him, as after that, he would tally off 6 consecutive wins. That win streak would be capped off by a victory against Edson Barboza in May of 2020, and that is what truly launched Dan Ige into the rankings, and since then has fought nothing but a killer's row. Edson Barboza, Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, Movsar Evloev, Bryce Mitchell, Andre Fili, Diego Lopez, Lerone Murphy. Are you kidding me, Dan Ige? Take a breather. He has fought nothing but the best in the world in this featherweight division, outside of the true title contenders in the top 3. But that is what leads me to this point. The problem for Dan Ige is that in those biggest moments, against the biggest names, against the best competition, that is where he falters most. He wins the fights that he should win, but when he gets the big opportunities, the fights that could launch him into true title contention status, it's where he falters and loses more often than not. And now he finds himself competing simply to hold his spot in the rankings and to keep his name relevant, and at 33 years old, all those fight years aside, he is in his prime. And in my opinion, I think from a betting perspective, this is one of the best spots on the card for me from a betting underdog, as I think Dan Ige has what it takes to put someone away like Sean Woodson. But I'm not saying it's going to come easy. I talked about the massive size difference in the featured bout between Yair Rodriguez and Patricio Pitbull, and conveniently enough, it's in the featherweight division. Well, this size difference between Ige and Woodson is even crazier. Dan Ige is 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. Sean Woodson is 6'2", 6'2" at 145 pounds with a 78-inch reach. So a 7-inch reach advantage and a 7-inch height advantage for the former heavyweight boxer turned featherweight mixed martial artist. How he got to where he is today, couldn't tell you. But what I will tell you is that Sean Woodson is as legit a prospect as you can find in the featherweight weight class right now. 13-1-1, has not lost a fight since June of 2020 in his second UFC bout, and that was against Julian Erosa. Since that loss, he has gone 6-0 with a draw to Luis Saldana back in August of 2022, and since the draw, 4 victories in a row: Dennis Bazooka, Charles Jourdain, Alex Caceres, and a finish over Fernando Padilla in December. But it's one thing to beat and finish some of those names, but it's another to take on Dan 50K Ige. So Sean Woodson, although he has the massive size advantage here, and he's also in his prime at 32, I still feel that this is a very big uphill battle for him, and maybe he can prove me so very wrong and show why he believes to be in the top 15 at featherweight. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. Next, we move to one of the most important fights on the card if you want to talk implications, specifically title implications, because this is a true number 1 contender fight here. Xiaonan, the number 1 ranked former title challenger, is taking on the number 3 ranked Virna Jandiroba, who in my opinion has already showcased her right to be a number 1 contender. Now she just has another opportunity to solidify it here. Xiaonan enters this fight having won 3 of her last 4 bouts, and the loss was in a title fight against Zhang Weili in April of last year at UFC 300, where she would lose via decision in the China versus China championship bout, the first of its kind in UFC history. And her only other losses in the UFC, Marina Rodriguez, a very close split decision, and then a dominant victory for Carla Esparza in what would launch her into a title opportunity. But Xiaonan is absolutely one of the most elite fighters in all of women's mixed martial arts in the UFC right now. Her most recent outing was in November against Tabitha Ricci, where she would have a very convincing decision win over her, and the other 2 victories, Jessica Andrade, a first-round knockout, and a victory over Mackenzie Dern. So if she can beat Virna Jandiroba here at 35 years old, make it victories in 4 of her last 5 and 2 in a row, I think she absolutely has done enough to earn a second crack at Zhang Weili's throne. But for Virna, she's won 5 of her last 6 and 4 back-to-back-to-back-to-back. and none bigger than a second-round submission over former title challenger Amanda Lemos that came last July. So no fight for her in about 10 months, but this is a huge opportunity for Virna to showcase her skills and to prove she's already done enough to be the #1 contender. Let me just add another one to the resume. You got to think Zhang Weili will be watching this fight closely, as she is just awaiting another contender after disposing of Tatiana Suarez in February and ending her perfect record. So I absolutely think we will see Zhang Weili paired with the winner of this fight, and then if she can win one more time and Valentina can defend against Manon, that is when we will ultimately see the super fight, more than likely in 2026. Xiaonan is pretty good in all facets of mixed martial arts, has shown weaknesses when she's on her back, so that could be a big opportunity for Virna Jandiroba. If she can move in close and get the takedown, she may be strong enough physically to hold Xiaonan down, but if Yan can keep the fight standing like she was so successful in doing against Tabitha Ricci, that is where I believe she has the best path to victory, as she is absolutely the better striker of the two here. I want to know your thoughts on this one, and since it's kind of buried on the prelims, but a #1 contender fight, I want to know who you think is next for Zhang Weili. The man is back again. Jim Miller is on another UFC card, and he's taking on Chase Hooper. Jim Miller will enter UFC 314 with 57 professional fights, and 45 of them have been in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And he's honestly shown no signs of slowing down. Even with all those fights and at 41 years of age, the man can still get dubs. As a matter of fact, he's won 6 of his last 8 fights, and all 6 of the victories have been by stoppage, and that includes his most recent outing against Damon Jackson at UFC 309 last November, where he submitted him in the first round. And out of his 18 losses, he has only been finished in 5 of them. So one of the most durable fighters that we've ever seen in the UFC as well. And he's going to need to showcase that durability against the very dangerous and slick Chase Hooper, who since moving to 155 has looked as legit as you can look. Chase's last loss came in October of 2022, where he would get finished by Steve Garcia, who, side note, is on, I believe, a 4 or 5 fight finish streak right now, one of the hottest guys on the outside looking in at 145. And that is what caused Chase Hooper to move up to lightweight, and since May of 2023, he has gone 4-0 with 3 straight finishes. In the most recent, a very similar fight to what he's having here against Jim Miller, against a longtime veteran and legend of the game, Clay Guida, where he would finish him in the first round with an armbar. When Chase Hooper was born, Jim Miller was already able to drive a car. 41 versus 25, a 16-year age gap in this one, so you gotta lean on the side of the younger man in Chase Hooper, right? And not only does he have age on his side, he's going to be much larger. He'll have a 5-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage, so it's going to be interesting to see if Jim Miller can close that gap, make it dirty in the striking realm, because I don't think Jim's going to want to take down Chase Hooper. He's too dangerous and slick with his submissions, if you ask me. And this is a huge opportunity for Chase Hooper to defeat back-to-back legends and show that he deserves to face younger, more in-their-prime competition. And dare I say, should he win here against Jim Miller and make it 5 in a row, give the man a damn chance to break into the top 15. So that is it for UFC 314. I feel like I've been in the studio today for hours. And, well, I kind of have now that I'm looking at the clock. So it's time to go, and I want to get all of your thoughts on UFC 314 in the comments down below. Give me your predictions, give me your bets, and everything else. Is there a fight that I missed out on? Is there a storyline or stake on the line that you felt I should have hit on more? Be sure to let me know in the comment section. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, heading into each card, I preview the best fights and talk about the storylines and what is at stake. In the aftermath, I recap the most meaningful results, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Friday and Monday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you in the next video.